probably 4 or 5 years that you still have to support the product. So Skate 3 comes out. By the time your premier game comes out, you've already got a pipeline that's full of schedules for what's next in line. And if you don't, then you might as well just shut your doors, because given the time frame it takes, where you're looking at 4 or 5 years of development to put a decent game out. So if you don't already have something in the pipeline and something in the works when your current game comes out, you're going to go out of business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, right? I mean, you get this a lot with movies too. You know, these things take so long to make, and then it's out, and then people immediately want more.
Right.
And I mean, that's just how it goes. But hopefully that keeps some people employed too. So yeah, that's those are our layoff discussion. In our next segment, we're going to talk more about the causes of it. I know you did a lot of research for this, so I'll probably let you take over for it. But yeah, layoffs are bad. Layoffs are bad, and it sucks.
Layoffs are bad. Don't do layoffs.
Layoffs suck if it happens to you. But we'll be right back.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Entertainment, everybody. We're wrapping up the show today talking about the cause and the purpose of all these layoffs. So the trend of layoffs in the video game industry can be attributed to several factors, and understanding this is key to forecasting the trends during and its impact on the industry's future. And we go to our corporate shill, Joseph Whalen, for the layoff report.
Wow.
Why layoffs are a good thing. Go.
No, not why they're a good thing. What causes layoffs? So we already kind of touched on economic fluctuations. So the video game industry is not immune to the broader economic trends in the world. And economic downturns or market uncertainty can lead to budget cuts and staff reductions. And everyone knows where we are with inflation and how tight money is, and everything's costing more money. So that's pretty obvious right there. We're also looking right now, and it's first time in the industry's history that we're in a post-pandemic period. So we're still looking at adjustments from that. COVID-19 pandemic led to a surge in gaming as people sought entertainment during the lockdowns. This surge may have led to overhiring or overexpansion in some companies. As the world returns to normalcy, demand may stabilize or decrease, leading to restructuring.
There's also, people now are like, there's the discussion of work from home. Well, why wouldn't I just always work from home if I can? Especially when it comes to game development. A lot of these folks packed up their work computers and brought them home to keep working on games during the pandemic as best they could. So now, there's a discussion of, do we even need to be going back into, in the work? And that's across all industries. If we can, can we just keep the work at home thing going? And then, that's more cost cutting, because then you don't have to rent office space.
Absolutely. And a lot of companies are looking at that as a possibility. In fact, behind you is a permanent workstation that's been set up for my wife, Michelle, now, who works from home 2 days a week as a result of that. Yep. And they've saw what they can get out of it. So the other thing you look at is shifts in consumer behavior. Changes in gaming trends and consumer preferences can impact revenue streams. Companies may need to restructure to align with these shifts, leading to layoffs in departments that no longer align with new strategies. We also have technological changes. Advancement in technology can render certain skills or positions obsolete. As companies invest in automation and new tech, there may be a reduced need for certain roles. And then we get to the corporate shill side of things with financial management and strategic shifts.
Ugh.
So poor financial management or strategic pivots can necessitate cost-cutting measures, including layoffs, which is exactly what Unity ran into.
Mhm.
You know, they're trying to make a buck, so they made a change in their strategic, you know, product line there, and it came back to bite them.
It's a very nice way of saying we want to make as much money as possible all the time.
Absolutely. So tell us about what the actual impact of all this is on the video game industry.
Yeah, so I mean, there's innovation and competition. Layoffs can lead to a consolidation of talent, with larger companies absorbing experienced personnel. You got a little bit of that with Embracer. You know, now that they're all part of this conglomerate, maybe they're having some cross-studio development. This could foster innovation, but might also reduce competition if smaller companies struggle to compete, which is definitely true, especially when it comes to indie development, which is what we have next. As talented individuals leave larger companies, there might be, a surge in indie game development, which I think we talked about this before when we were talking about the Microsoft Blizzard thing, where
Yes.
it's like as more studios are bought up and part of large corporate structures,
Something has to fill that vacuum, and the indie companies step in to do that.
Exactly. There's, this can lead to more diverse and innovative gaming landscape, which I'm all for. Assuming, it's, I'm all for the creative side of things, as you can probably tell by this. It's tough to see, but maybe that is a silver lining.
Well, and the one advantage you get from the indie side of things is you don't get the corporate shield. You get idealism. You get companies that come in here with this idealistic view of, I'm going to make this for the fans. I'm going to listen to the fans, and I'm going to produce something for the fans. If it doesn't sell, then the corporate guys come in, they suck up the company, and then they move on. A lot of times, for the longest time, BioWare was of that philosophy of, you had a couple of regular guys there that wanted to make good games for people, and they did, until they sold their souls to EA and moved on.
We would all do it, let's be honest.
I would too. Hell, if I could get, a couple $1 million for this podcast, I'd sell it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, next episode we're gonna have McDonald's branding all around the place. I highly recommend you play Sea of Stars, because it is a very similar situation. I'm blanking on the name of the developers, but it's like that, where they made another game called The Messenger, but they all seem like very down-to-earth people. We have shifts in job roles. The industry may witness a shift in the types of roles that are in demand, with more emphasis on technologies like AI, VR, and cloud gaming. I don't know about VR. Are we done with VR?
I think VR is pretty much, although Apple wants to bring VR back, I think they're missing the boat.
They're going to make people spend like $10,000 for a headset,
so you can get freaky eyes on the outside of your headset.
Yeah. We talked about this already a little bit, but the impact on game quality and diversity. Layoffs can lead to reduced manpower, impacting quality. However, they can also force companies to focus on core competencies and produce higher quality titles, which is kind of what Sony's doing. They're spending and taking the time to have all these first party games that are, industry wide successes, commercially and critically, that sort of hold up the brand just by virtue of existing. And finally, employee well-being and industry reputation, which the gaming industry already has a pretty bad reputation in terms of like crunch culture, which is probably still happening. But I think it has been reduced because it was exposed a lot with how often a lot of these devs are crunching. And you hear stories from like 2005 of people pulling like 30-hour days. And it's like, oh my God, how did we let that happen? But hopefully that's a little bit better now.
And I've been on build teams, not for the gaming industry, but in the software industry, where we've put in 36, 48 hours straight to get a build out the door for, an artificial deadline that was set by a product manager because he made a promise to a customer. So it happens across the board.
Yeah. This might affect the ability to attract top talent in the future, which is true. If your industry has a terrible reputation and fires people all the time, people probably don't want to work for you.
Amen to that.
So yeah, I mean, that pretty much sums everything up. That covers the layoffs. Of course, we started off pretty positively with the Game Awards.
So considering the influence of economic fluctuations on the video game industry, how do you think companies can better prepare for market uncertainties to avoid drastic measures like layoffs, especially given the industry's recent success?
I don't know. Maybe pay higher ups less, which is never going to happen, but it's a suggestion. I know everybody turns to, what was his name? He was a Nintendo CEO, Iwata, I forget his name, but Nintendo, when the Wii U came out and like completely failed, he ended up taking a pay cut so they didn't have to lay people off. Now everybody looks to that like it was a miracle, because it kind of was.
Right.
And people don't, CEOs are never going to do that. but that would be nice if that was the alternative to laying people off. But it's just not. It's not the way the capitalism goes, unfortunately.
See, and I think it has to be research and development. I think if you got enough irons in the fire, if you throw enough stuff against the wall, something's going to stick. And if you've got a couple of games that are in there, you can tell after 2 or 3 years of development if your game's going to be a success, because at that point in time, you've trotted out previews, industry experts take a look at it. You've got some play time with it, and people need to be more antiseptic, I'll say, in their judgment of their products. If you get to that point and the product isn't very good, you need to cut your ties to it and move on.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because you should look into the development cycle of Redfall. We covered that last time I hosted for a gaming show, but since that game's come out and is awful, devs have come out and said that they knew this game was going to fail, but they had to release it anyway because you had to put something out, and it was like sunk cost fallacy where we spent all this time. We probably should cancel this game and rework it, but higher ups need us to release something, so here's what you get.
Well, and going back to one of my old favorites, Star Wars: The Old Republic, same thing. They spent almost 10 years of development on that, 6 of which was trying to build their own game engine before they realized they couldn't, and they wound up using a 10-year-old game engine to basically reskin the entire game for it. And then they released it, and within the first 6 months, they lost 50% of their subscribers because the game just wasn't up to what it was supposed to be. At some point in time, you need to have the sense to pull the plug on it.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, and you have other projects that are in the works that are under development, you shift your resources to something that's more promising.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll, with all these layoffs, and maybe somebody will learn something from it, hopefully.
Yep.
But yeah, so any final thoughts? I feel like we've covered a lot of this. We've shared our opinions.
We've beaten the horse quite well here.
Well, I guess that's going to wrap things up for today. Thank you so much for listening. Before we head out, we've got some more show plugs for you. If you haven't
But the
already,
first set wasn't enough.
I know the plug's so nice we do them twice. If you haven't already subscribed, what are you doing? Pause this. Go subscribe, come back, rewind it, play from the beginning. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, maybe Stitcher if it's still around, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Amazon, and of course, Pandora. If you have any comments or questions about today's show, email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. We're on Twitter, some people call it X, insights_things. Twitch, if you have Amazon Prime, that means you've got Twitch Prime, and we'd love to have that Prime sub over at twitch.tv/insightsintothings, where some of you may be watching us live stream right now. Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast, Instagram at insightsintothings, and all of these links and so much more can be found on insightsintothings.com. That's going to wrap things up for today.
That's it. Another one in the books.
Stay safe, everybody.
Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow, where we take a deeper look into how the issues of today will impact the world of tomorrow. From politics and world news to media and technology, we discuss how today's headlines are becoming tomorrow's reality.
Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow. This is episode 22, No More Yesterdays. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my informed and concerned co-host, Michelle Whalen.
Hi, everyone.
How you doing today, sweetheart?
Doing okay. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Anything exciting going on other than flip-flop of hosts on the shows recently?
No, I think we're all trying to get into the swing of things, I guess.
Indeed, we have kicked off our holiday with Thanksgiving and mad rush up until the end of December now.
Yeah. Now it's all downhill.
Yeah, pretty much. So, in this episode of Insights into Tomorrow, we delve into the alarming parallels and stark differences between the nationalism and anti-Semitism of the Nazi era and today's world. We explore how both periods are marked by ideologies of exclusion and economic turmoil, fueling nationalist sentiments, alongside the dangerous tendency of scapegoating minorities. The Nazi regime's systematic state-sponsored anti-Semitism and its sophisticated propaganda machine present a stark contrast to today's more decentralized, internet-driven spread of anti-Semitic ideology. And I thought this was kind of poignant because we have had for several years now in the United States, one entire political movement that focuses on the past. You know, this whole idea of make America great again, but they never tell you when they're referring to.
Right.
And the time that they're referring to goes back to some of these darker days during a time period of exclusion, of civil rights not being a priority, of individual rights not being a priority. And the people that want to go back to that time are the ones who were in power and advantaged at that time. And that was a very small number of people at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you have a large segment of the population pushing for that now and completely ignoring the parallels that they're shooting for now compared to what happened in the 1930s and 40s with the rise of other nationalist movements, socialism and fascism, is disturbing. And that's why I titled this podcast No More Yesterdays. You know, we don't want to go back. We've, over the last 100 years, we as a country, we as a civilization, and the human race in general have evolved considerably in that time. And there's a segment of the population who desperately wants to drag us back to those dark times. So we're going to take a look at some of the comparisons on that and offer some insights and side-by-side looks at what it was like then, what it is today, and hopefully have enough wisdom to not go down that dark path again. But before we do that, though, I want to take a moment to remind our listening and viewing audience to, if you don't already do so, subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Tomorrow. You can also find audio and video versions of all the network's podcasts listed as Insights into Things, pretty much anywhere you can get a podcast these days. I would also invite you to write in, give us your feedback, disagree with us, tell me your point of view. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can find us on X at insights_things, or you can find links to all those and more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. Shall we get going?
Oh, let's the fun begin.
Here we go. The comparison of nationalism and anti-Semitism during the rise of the Nazi Party in the first half of the 20th century with today's political climate reveals some notable similarities as well as significant differences. From a similarity standpoint, you have an ideology of exclusion, both eras witness ideologies that define the nation in exclusionary terms, which is really contrary to what this country was ever built on. The Nazi Party's version of nationalism was grounded in racial purity and the exclusion of Jews, among others, despite the fact that there's Jewish ancestry on Hitler's side, and Hitler wasn't even German to begin with. So, purity. Modern nationalism, while not typically as extreme, often similarly hinges on defining insiders and outsiders, sometimes marginalizing certain groups. There's also significant similarities in economic factors. Economic uncertainty played a significant role in the rise of the Nazi Party as it capitalized on the economic woes of post-World War I Germany to gain support. Today, the economic uncertainty, particularly in the wake of globalization and economic crises, also fuels nationalist sentiments.
So now we'll talk about scapegoating. So the Nazi regime notoriously used Jews as a scapegoat for Germany's problems. In contemporary politics, while not as extreme or widespread, there is still a tendency in some nationalist narratives to scapegoat immigrants or ethnic minorities for social and economic issues. The use of propaganda. The Nazis were adept at using propaganda to spread their ideologies. And today, while the methods have evolved, the use of media and particularly social media to dismantle nationalist and anti-Semitic sentiments echoes this aspect of the past. The rise of the term fake news to discredit credible sources that point out the lies and crimes of one political organization over another has threatened to undermine any source of truth.
So while there's a number of similarities, there's also differences. So the first one we look at is the institutional framework. The current global institutional framework, including organizations like the United Nations and various human rights conventions, acts as a significant barrier against the rise of extremist ideologies akin to those of the Nazi era. Even though the United Nations has proven time and again to be ineffective against even mildly concerted efforts by a few obstructionist members to undermine the basic principles of its existence. The other is public awareness and education. Again, you would think by now we would have a better understanding of these things having lived through it once. There is a higher level of public awareness and education about the dangers of extreme nationalism and anti-Semitism today, largely as a result of the lessons learned from World War II and the Holocaust. However, with active efforts to distort history, ban books and curricula teaching about the atrocities and culture of denial has arisen that threatens the basic defense against a repeat of the atrocities of the Nazis.
Then there's the extent and nature of anti-Semitism. The anti-Semitism of the Nazi era was state-sponsored, systematic, and led to the Holocaust. Modern anti-Semitism, while a serious concern, typically does not manifest with the same intensity or state-level endorsement. This less intensive approach, in and of itself, may actually be more dangerous, and it makes the concept of anti-Semitism more appealing to the less radicalized members of society, and thus threatens to make the practice even more widespread. Globalization and digital connectivity. So now we have the contemporary world, which, is more interconnected now than it was in the 1930s and the 1940s. This globalization and digital connectivity can both fuel nationalist sentiments, but also provide means for counter-narratives and global solidarity against extremism. So recent history has shown how easily social media can be manipulated to propagate hate and violence more so than prevent it throughout.
So just on what we talked about here, Do you think the technological advantages of communication today makes it more or less likelihood for something like this nationalist movement to propagate or be defended against?
Honestly, I would have to say kind of a little bit of both. It's definitely easier for the word to get out, for this propaganda to be spread. You have so many people that as soon as they see a post about something, a tweet about something, a picture about something, they forward it to everybody that they know without even checking to see if it's factual. But then on the other hand, you have real-time news, real-time events that are happening that people are being informed about pretty much right as it happens, as opposed to back in the day where it could be weeks before somebody heard about something, months before somebody heard something, hours before. Now it's almost instantaneous that the other side of things is getting out there. So I think it's a little bit of both with it.
What about the the level of anonymity that you could have starting a movement on the internet now where you're insulated? You don't have to put yourself out there. When you had the Nazis were starting their movements, they were going out, putting themselves in public beer halls and riling up the people directly and exposing themselves at that point in time to prosecution and persecution and stuff like that. Do you think it's more likely that you'll get, we'll call them rabble rousers, when they can hide behind the anonymity of a Twitter or something like that?
Oh, absolutely. Because now, and you see that just in general with the trolls that are out there, that, somebody posts a picture of Dolly Parton from this past few days ago. She performed a halftime show, and all these trolls came out, or she wasn't really singing, she was lip syncing, and and just and is it something where they would have actually ever said that to her face? Probably not. They would never have done that. But now, because you can hide behind it and you don't have that fear of persecution, and especially now, there are so many things out there where before, if you commented or posted something, it would have your name. And granted, most people would change their usernames and things like that. Now there's so many areas to post or comment where you can do it anonymously now. They've added that feature. So now it gives you, now I can be more of a rebel rouser, and go out there and say what I have to say, and nobody will ever find out that it's me.
That's a very good point. So how do you think the rise of social media and the concept of fake news has affected the way Americans understand and discuss political issues, including topics like nationalism and anti-Semitism? Can people have a logical, civilized discussion, or we're seeing extremism on both sides, and just because one side says one thing, you could have one side that finds the cure for cancer, finds a magical pill that solves world hunger and creates world peace all at one time, and the other side would oppose it because the opposition came up with it.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's tough because especially now with what is going on in current events as of today, with the events of 10/7 that are still fresh. You have hostages that are, just starting to be released almost, 50 days later. And there are people obviously on both sides, and it's very hard to have that sit down with somebody that's so passionate. You almost need to find somebody who's I don't want to say sensible, but because everybody is passionate about their stance, no matter which stance they take. But sometimes when you're so passionate about something, you can't even allow the other side to even educate you on how they feel. Why do you feel the way you feel? What has been done to you? But you need to hear me as well. And that's, I think, the problem, that when you get into these situations, the person that's, from both sides, they're just so passionate, they don't even have that moment to just let me sit back and take it in.
There's an overall lack of objectivity when the passions run that high.
Right.
And when you lack the ability to be objective, you also can't make a logical, objective argument for your point of view either.
Right.
And I think that's the problem. Like, if somebody questions, if you feel passionate about something, that's wonderful. And if somebody questions you about that, you should be passionate enough, but knowledgeable enough to defend your point of view.
Right.
And when you resort to insults, which is usually the first direction that it goes.
Right.
It's first they start to insult you, and then they attack your position without providing any support for their own position. When you go to those tactics, you kind of lose all your credibility at that point in time.
Right.
And that's, I think, what we tend to run into. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dig in a little bit deeper into some of the anti-Semitism of the Nazi era. We'll be right back. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
And we're back. So the comparison of anti-Semitism in the Nazi era and its manifestation in the contemporary world underscores both a continuity in prejudice and a significant shift in how it is expressed and dismantled. So anti-Semitism in the Nazi era. You had state-sponsored. The most striking aspect of Nazi-era anti-Semitism was its systematic state sponsorship. The Nazi regime under Hitler embedded anti-Semitic ideology into government policy, which led to the progressive isolation, dehumanization, and eventual mass extermination of Jews in the Holocaust. This involved legislation like the Nuremberg Laws and the organization of state-sponsored pogroms such as Kristallnacht, which actually had their 85th, I believe. No, I'm trying to remember how many. I think it was 85 years. It was the anniversary of Kristallnacht, actually, not that long ago. So then we also have the propaganda machine. The Nazis effectively used state-controlled media, including newspapers, films, and radio broadcasts to spread this anti-Semitic propaganda. This propaganda was sophisticated and persuasive, shaping public opinion by depicting Jews as the source of Germany's economic problems and social decay. This constant bombardment of anti-Semitic messaging was a key tool in desensitizing the German public to the escalating persecution of the Jewish people.
And I think that's really the key there is the desensitization, because I think you're running into that now, contemporary-wise. So anti-Semitism in the contemporary world is a little bit different, but certainly still present. Versions and incidents. In recent times, there's been a noted increase in anti-Semitic incidents globally. These incidents range from vandalism and hate speech to violent attacks. Unlike the Nazi era, contemporary anti-Semitism is not typically part of an overt government policy, but rather manifests at the level of individual actions and groups, some of which can be classified as extremist or terrorist in nature. You also have the role of digital platforms today, which we already talked about briefly. The proliferation of the internet and social media has radically changed the landscape of how anti-Semitic ideologies are spread. These platforms often serve as echo chambers, where harmful stereotypes and conspiracy theories about Jewish people can be circulated rapidly and without traditional filters or controls. Unlike the centralized state-controlled propaganda of the Nazi era, modern anti-Semitic rhetoric is more decentralized, but can be just as pervasive and insidious in its reach.
So, some key considerations. So, you have the scale and intensity. While contemporary anti-Semitism is a serious concern, its scale and intensity differ from state-orchestrated genocidal campaigns of the Nazis. The Holocaust remains a uniquely horrific manifestation of anti-Semitism. The global response. So, today's world, informed by the lessons of the Holocaust, tends to have stronger institutional and societal responses against anti-Semitism. Numerous countries have laws criminalizing hate speech and Holocaust denial, and there are global efforts to combat and educate against anti-Semitism. Granted, there is also a push in some countries, including the United States, to manipulate the education system for political purpose, something anti-Semitism instruction could easily fall victim to. Then we also have the challenges of the digital age. The decentralized nature of the internet poses unique challenges in monitoring and countering anti-Semitic content. Online hate speech can be more elusive and requires nuanced approach to balance freedom of speech with the need to prevent hate speech and violence.
While the form and expression of anti-Semitism have evolved from the state-driven, systematic approach of the Nazi era to the more fragmented and decentralized incidents of today, the underlying prejudices and stereotypes remain a concerning continuity. The modern challenge lies in adapting the changing landscape of communication and globalization in which these harmful ideologies persist and spread. So, clearly there are differences between today's anti-Semitism and the Nazi era. One of the concerns that I have is what you're seeing today is more toned down in that it's not the same level of state-sponsored hatred that you were getting during the Nazis, which makes it more appealing to a larger group of people who would have been less inclined to support some of the policies of the Nazis, but it still strikes a note with the prejudices that they have, where they might not want to take Jews and put them in concentration camps, but we're not going to let Jews have jobs in this sector, or we're not going to let them live in this neighborhood, or we're going to, do the various violent things that we see now. And it makes it almost more palatable to a larger group of people because you're not catering to that extremist group. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, again, right now with what's going on, there is the violence going on. There are people that are out there that it's not the Holocaust. It's not let's put you in a concentration camp. It's let's just kill the Jews. Like that's what is so scary is there are people who in almost every country right now, people that are being attacked only because they are Jewish. You have a woman in France who a group of people broke into her house and beat her up and almost left her for dead only because she was Jewish. So unfortunately, from what I'm seeing, it's almost worse in a way.
That's my point. That's exactly my point is because it's not
it's not let's gather you up and put you someplace. It's we're just going to take care of you right now.
Right, but it's done almost on an individual basis.
Yes, there's nobody saying we're the Nazis.
Right. You don't need to have that overt,
I can just
obvious presence.
Right. I just hate Jews, so I'm going and attacking you.
Right. And that's my point is that because it's being done
yes. Okay.
less from a government policy standpoint and more from a grassroots standpoint.
Right.
It brings more of those hatred-filled people into the mix to take action that they wouldn't normally have taken.
Right. There are people who would normally use Uber for rides or to get food who have gone in and changed their profile so that they don't have a Jewish sounding name. Or if they're going and getting a ride, don't put in their actual home address. They're going 2 blocks away to pick up a ride because they don't know who's coming to pick them up.
And this is very similar to the 1970s when you had the very Jew that were going out there and kidnapping people and hijacking planes. And when people would travel, they would travel.
Jewish people in the town, if any, that would be the place where you'd have this huge outpour of anti-Semitic. But New York City, like that it just boggles my mind and just makes me sad and angry and mad and everything else that's what's out there.
So one of the things that we've certainly seen over the last 5 years, 6 years, has been this push in schools to change curricula that I don't want to say it alters history, but it certainly downplays certain aspects of history.
Nice history.
Right.
Yeah.
Given the historical context of the Holocaust, how important do you think it is to learn about and understand these events in today's education system? And do you think it's happening?
Well, I know in our school system, it has been. They've done various things. I know she read The Diary of Anne Frank, and that was a very big push to learning it. And even younger than that, there were little hints of it. So I think it's, it should be age appropriate, but I think just with any other history lesson, it's something that needs. But I think it also is the same thing for Japanese Americans with the internment camps. None of that when I was in school was ever, that was something that was kind of glossed over. So I don't want to say, yes, it should be just the Holocaust. No, I think we need to go back and learn all of these things that the country has done to its own people or other countries have done to their own people, because if you forget it and you don't teach it, you're going to relive it. And that's always been something, I've known about the Holocaust since I was very young, going to Hebrew school, and that's where I learned it. I learned it in Hebrew school. I didn't learn it in school until high school. I think that was really the first time we ever talked about it, but I had already known all about it. I don't want to say I was desensitized to it, but I knew about it. So okay. And I even remember being excused from one of the classes because I already knew. The teacher didn't want to bore me with anything or upset me. So if you want to go to the library, feel free. Okay, sure, I'll go. But that's just always been something, like I said, we've always been taught as a Jewish people, we have to keep talking about it. We have to keep teaching about it, because the minute we stop, it's going to happen again. And that's where I think so many people right now, with everything that's going on, we speak up and say something, that we're kind of going down that road again to being put. You know, how scary is it that people are posting on Facebook, if something happens, will you hide me? And that people aren't responding, or that people feel the need that they have to even put that out there because they're in such fear of their life. Yeah. Like that's no way for anybody to live, no matter what religion or background or, you know, race you are, to have that fear.
Honestly, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it on the show today, because it is getting to that point. It's getting to the point where we're really threatening to go back down that path again. And with the coming election, and you know, one of the major candidates in this election, it's a significant threat. And the things that are being said by this candidate now tell you that that's the kind of world that he wants to live in, where he's the one that's in charge. He's the guy that's picking and choosing who goes to the camp and who doesn't. So we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at the real risk of history repeating itself. We'll be right back.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest.
Because the husband won't let her go to theme parks anymore.
We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com.
That she gets emotional at every time she does.
Things. Our audio episodes
suggest a different trajectory, albeit not without its own set of risks. So what are the institutional safeguards? Well, since World War II, the establishment of international institutions like the UN and various human rights treaties, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, has created a global framework aimed at preventing the reoccurrence of mass atrocities. These institutions work towards promoting peace, security, and human rights, a platform for international cooperation and intervention which was lacking in the pre-World War II era. However, history over the last 30 years has proven that mass atrocities, ethnic cleansings, and continued human rights violations still occur all too frequently.
So what about the human rights norms? So there is now a stronger global consensus on human rights norms. The horrors of the Holocaust were a key catalyst in the formation of these norms, and they serve as a moral compass that guides international relations and national policies, although adherence varies by country. But rogue nations and even rogue politicians have proven their ability to avoid prosecution from world courts while still committing violations of basic human rights. Then we have the democratic resilience. So many countries have developed more robust democratic structures compared to the early 20th century. These structures are designed to safeguard against authoritarianism